And welcome to another episode of the Kids Ministry Collective podcast. My name's Tom Bump, and I'm your host. Thanks for joining me, my friends. I'm looking forward to this episode. Are you ready to hear some good wisdom? Because you better get ready. We are going to continue this series. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, I'm holding the book up. Everyone does better with a coach. We're going to continue with one of the co-authors of this fantastic resource that I would highly recommend everybody pick up, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes of how you can get your copy. But I've had the honor of getting to know this amazing leader who I can call friend. We've been talking for almost an hour before we've recorded, so y'all missed that. I guess I should have hit the record button, but oh well, you miss all the little gold nuggets we threw out to each other. But Vicki Abbott is just a phenomenal leader. Got over 20 years experience and leading some amazing ministry. And I'm going to let her tell more about herself. But it's just been an honor to be part of the coaching group with her, to help write this book with her. And so, Vicki, welcome to the KMC podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Tom. It has been a joy to catch up with you for the last hour. I think we could talk for hours. And so thanks for having me.
Hey.
Uh, Little bit about me. As you said, I have been in children's ministry for 20 years. I have been on staff at my current church for 13, just
Ooh,
celebrated
all right.
13 years currently in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I serve and as the multi-site director of children's ministry. And so we are multi-site. We have 6 campuses currently and learning how to do that well and loving what I get to do. I am still very passionate about children's ministry. Just celebrated 28 years of marriage.
Oh, awesome.
And this year has been, I feel like, the year of celebration, celebrating 28 years of marriage, celebrating 13 years at church. And then we celebrated the marriage of our oldest son. So that has been really cool as well to be able to do that. And so
Yeah.
that is a little bit about me.
That is awesome. I'm so glad to hear all that. And it's nice to have another seasoned leader to talk to. I think that's why we've become such fast friends, is just because we've been through a lot of seasons, and it's nice to
Yeah.
see your growth and what God has been doing in your ministry over the years. And even just recently catching up has been a blast to hear what God's doing up there in the great state of Michigan, because
Yeah. So
it's
good. So good.
always going to be home for me, even though I'm a Hoosier by birth. Michigan will always be home for me. So, well, we always start the podcast off with a why style question because you know Jim and you know he likes to ask, well, why? So it's kind of become a thing on the podcast that we ask the why. So here's your why question. What's your why for being in kids ministry? Because obviously, for doing it for 20 years, it must be strong because I know a lot of leaders would tap out a lot sooner. So, what's your
Mm.
why that keeps you going?
Yeah, I could probably talk for a half an hour just on my why. So I will try to keep this brief, but I think when I started out, my why in children's ministry was my kids and like what children's ministry was like for me growing up and what it wasn't and what I wanted for my kids. And as I've continued to stay in children's ministry and see it evolve, my why is just the families and the kids that I see in my ministry and the kids who have yet to belong. I'm
Mm,
so passionate about the gospel and helping kids know Jesus. I still think he is the greatest message out there.
yes.
And I want him to be lifted up. And that is my why and why I stick.
There you go. I love it. I love it. And I think knowing you like I do and knowing your heart for ministry and knowing for your heart for leaders, and God's given you a gift for working with a lot of leaders because obviously you're managing a lot of campuses right now and a lot of growth right now, that your chapter was a great chapter to write and a great chapter to read. Especially everybody knows what I do with restoring leaders, and so your chapter is one that I will be using with that ministry because you nailed some fantastic things of truth for leaders. Because if you're going to stay in ministry for the long haul, you got to care for your heart.
Absolutely.
And so I thought you did a fantastic job on this chapter. Give us a 30,000 foot view of your chapter. We'll kind of get into a couple things. We're not gonna give too much away because everybody needs to
Right? We
get the
can't
book.
give it all away. Yeah.
You got to get the book. But give us a view of what you're talking about when you're talking about leadership and caring for your heart as a leader.
Yeah. So I think at the root of it, why I really was passionate about writing this chapter is for so many leaders, caring for our heart it does not come naturally because I feel like we're servants and we want to serve everyone and we're serving kids, we're serving families, we're serving others in the church. It doesn't come naturally to care for ourselves and to serve ourselves first. And as I just look at leaders who are leaving and burning out, and it saddens me. And I really feel like in writing this chapter, I wanted to speak to people and help them understand that it doesn't have to be that way. And
Hmm.
maybe give them a few tools that have helped me along the way so they can stay in ministry. Kind of like learn a little bit about what Vicki did and didn't do. So maybe your heart can be a little bit more cared for earlier in ministry.
Mm, that's good. So
Yeah.
when it comes to caring for our hearts, why do you think so many leaders struggle to practice it?
Mm.
Because we all know we should be doing it. And there's a lot of talk about it, but a lot of leaders struggle with doing it. Why do you think that's true?
That's a really good question because you're right. There's so many books on it. Like you can read about it everywhere. And like I wrote about it. So
Yeah.
like it's an important topic. If I were to think back to like why it was hard for me to practice it and why it might be hard for others is one, I don't think we necessarily schedule caring for our heart. I don't think
Mm,
we
yeah.
understand that it's okay to put it on the calendar to care for your heart. What makes it on your calendar is what's important. I think
Yes.
that's part of it. And maybe we have forgotten a little bit about what it means to care for our heart. I've had conversations with leaders where they feel like they can't do it well or they're not doing it well. And so in that they're like, well, I'm failing. They feel like they're failing. And so they'll say, I am failing at this, so why even bother?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just want to like draw them close and go, it's okay. It's okay. You're doing your
Yeah.
best. You need to try. I
I'm
think
glad you
that's why
said
it's
that.
it's hard for
Yeah.
people.
I'm glad you said it that way because I I mean, from the work with restoring leaders, I've seen that. I've heard that too. And I felt it. I mean, there are times where when I've walked through some of the dark valleys of, well, I'm just gonna keep trudging along. I'm just gonna ministry's hard and you start
Mhm.
taking on the whole Eeyore attitude, oh, woe is me, and it's raining today again. And a lot of
Yeah.
leaders just pound that down into their soul. And it's heartbreaking. You're right. It is. It is heartbreaking to me. One, that I put myself there, but then
Yeah.
I see it with other leaders too, doing that same thing.
And that's
Um,
that's not what God wants. Like he
right.
has placed us here. He doesn't want that for us. Um, I think it can also be hard for leaders when they're in seasons, like you said, of hard. And maybe leaders don't have people in leadership over them or lateral to them who care for their heart.
Mm,
And so a leader isn't seeing it in the leaders beside them. or their leader above them isn't talking to them about caring for their heart, what it looks like to take a Sabbath, what it looks like to have boundaries. And so I think sometimes when you don't have that, where you can look to somebody to see it, it might be harder to do it yourself. Can
Oh,
you imagine what does it look like to care for your heart if you have people around you who aren't doing it?
yeah.
It doesn't come natural.
Wow. That's very true.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of leaders that have expressed in surveys where they don't feel like they've gotten that kind of support and
Mm-hmm.
so and then they don't know where to turn. I know as a younger leader there wasn't much out there. There weren't very many safe places that I could turn, except that when you went to a conference, and you see this far too often, unfortunately, in conferences, that everybody, instead of talking about what God's doing, we're swapping war wounds and
Right.
the battle scars, and I'm hoping that we can change some of that. But because I think that leads to the next part of this is you shared a statistic that's close to my heart that I've used and I've shared with other people. It might even be in my book. Was that when Barna did some research back in 2022, he used the statistic of 38% of pastors have considered quitting in the last year. When I first read that, I was like, okay, yeah, that's definitely for senior pastors. Because in our world of children's and family ministry, I think that number was higher than 38%. I think it was 40 or 45%, honestly. I did a little survey in the Kid Ministry Collective, and it was
Hmm.
about 46% of leaders that responded, which was a couple hundred leaders, said, I've thought about quitting in the last year. Now, I know that Barna has since 2022 come back and said that percentage dropped a couple of points, but it's still too high.
Still high. It's still
It's
too high.
still
Yeah.
too high. What do you see as still as some of the causes for that number staying up there? Because that's scary.
Also, another good question that could probably be a really
Yes,
long
it could be a whole podcast
segment.
right there.
I think there's a lot of causes that could be why that statistic is so high. A ministry is hard. A ministry is not getting any easier. The family dynamic is changing. Post-COVID ministry is different. People are learning, they need to learn how to do ministry different. We are learning how to minister to Gen Alpha, many of them which have millennial parents. And so the ministry landscape is so different and so hard. And so that in itself can be a reason why people are leaving and the number is so high. And I also think it's high because so many people are doing ministry alone.
Mm,
They're not reaching out. So
yes,
it's like they're not caring for their heart and they're doing ministry alone. And it doesn't have to be that way.
right.
It doesn't have to be that way. When I see leaders who feel like they're alone, it breaks my heart because there's so many of us and we're all kingdom minded. We're all wanting the same thing. And so it breaks my heart when I see people doing ministry alone. And I think that's part of why the statistic is still so high
Yeah,
in that.
yeah. And in your chapter, you remind leaders of that very thing when it comes to caring for your heart is one of those things is stop doing ministry alone. What are some ways that leaders can do this? Because you're going to have, I know some of our listeners are serving in small churches, 100,
Yeah.
150 less or less, where they don't have a big team to draw from. They don't have a support network. They probably have a senior leader who has no clue about what real children's ministry is. They just know that they need to have it. They value it. They just have never done it before
Absolutely.
because most senior pastors don't get trained on how to do kids ministry. They don't understand its world, but they do value it. And I think that's sometimes misunderstood.
It
I think
is.
a lot of pastors value kids ministry. They just don't know how to show it and demonstrate it. That still leaves the pastor, children's director, what it doesn't matter about your title, but you're leading
Mhm.
and you're doing it alone. What are some ways that they can and anybody can, regardless of church size, stop doing it alone? What are some things that you could help them with?
Absolutely. So I think there's a few things that are very, very helpful. First, find a coach or a mentor. And that might sound plugged because, like, right, the name of the book is Everyone Does Better with a Coach.
Yeah.
But I truly believe find somebody that has either been there or is in there currently. Find a coach or a mentor. Go to a conference if you can. I've noticed even in the last couple of years, so many conferences are offering online content. And I've even seen a couple where they're doing like replays where they have like in the Facebook chat where you can like chat and connect with people. That is a really cool way. Find a cohort,
Yeah.
find someone that you can like in a like-minded space. Just recently, Tom, I saw something on Facebook. There was somebody who posted openly, and she just said, "Is there anyone out there who can mentor me?"
Wow.
And I was like, I know. I was like, that it's amazing that she felt that she could do that. And also sad that, if she was doing it from a space of loneliness, I never want somebody to feel like they're doing it alone.
Yeah.
So, like, put out, like, we have a community in social media, put out there, like, I'm looking for someone. I know in rural areas it's harder because, like, to get to a group of church people together, you might be driving 45 minutes to an
Yeah.
hour. But what would it look like to do that 4 times a year?
Yep.
Just reach out to the greater community. Even if you find one, right? Find one person.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I don't want anyone to do ministry alone.
Yeah.
So if they are, there's a lot of us out there who are willing to step in and help with that. So, and I
Right.
think you do that really well as, with restoring leaders and what you do, just giving them a place to feel like they have somebody
Yep.
on their side. Let's do this together.
Yep.
So, yeah,
That's
that is what
awesome.
I would say.
And I think that's one of the things that it's the reason why the Kid Ministry Collective exists. We wanted to bring a
Mhm.
play because when Ron and I started this years ago, it was that we wanted to get with other people. We wanted connection. We were lonely ourselves, and we're like, we can't be the only ones. And we found very quickly. And we don't have the biggest Facebook group. We're not even close, and that's okay. We weren't trying and needing to be the biggest group. We wanted to be a group that really brought community with it. And that's also part of why I started, Kidmin Plus
Mhm.
was I wanted a leadership community where people could come and really find connection and deeper than Facebook will allow you to go because Facebook has its
Yeah,
limits. But then for me, being with you in the cohort that we were in, that was life changing even at my age and my season of life. It was powerful for me. And but so I agree. I mean, as somebody that's been down the road, I think I learned early on, well, not early on, but about midway, I learned that I should have somebody ahead of me that's a few years,
yes,
not just in
yes.
seasons, but also in the church size. So, I served in a
Mhm.
lot of churches that were 150, 200, 250. I spent a lot of my life there. My dad was a pastor of those size churches. So I grew up in that world and I understand that culture. I understand a small, mid-sized town, blue collar farming communities. That's where I grew up. And but what I did is I went out and found people that were in churches of five, six, 700 and friended them and started picking their brains and asking. I found somebody that was in a more city suburb church. I wanted to see what they were doing and what could I apply and pull in. So I think what you just shared there is a big piece of wisdom that I want our listeners to grab
Mhm.
onto is do whatever you have to do. If you are lonely, don't sit there. Take some action. Go
Right,
forward
right,
somewhere.
absolutely.
Don't
Yeah.
stay stuck. I like that because you need to find that tribe of
Yeah,
people.
you do. Everyone needs that. I know our coaching group was that for me. I know often people will say like, "Oh, if you're at a bigger church or if you have, people beside you, it can still be lonely." everyone needs to find their tribe and
Yeah.
people that can come alongside them
Yep.
and, be a part of their trusted community. And
Yes.
I love our coaching group for that,
Yep.
for many reasons, but, that is a big one.
Yeah.
I wish I would have done it so many years earlier.
Yeah. Again, there's something for you listeners, but you've heard me say it. If you've been listening to the podcast, you just heard her say it from two. So now you've heard two seasoned leaders say it. We both wish we had started this sooner. So don't be like us in this area. Start now,
Absolutely.
invest in yourself, see the value. Sure, it's going to take some financial investment at times, but you're worth it. We both say that and we believe it. And if I had to do it all over again, yes, I would have found my coach. I would have found a cohort. Of course, when I started, that wasn't even a thing. So I was in it for a while before I finally started seeing these things pop up. And then I was all over it. And I
Right.
even did extra jobs, odd jobs to pay for my coach because my church wouldn't. But I was like, you know what? I'm worth investing in. I don't want to stay the same. I'm stuck. I need some new perspective. I need someone to talk to tell me I'm not nuts for wanting to go do this. And
Mhm.
that made all the difference. It was a game changer. And it helped me because there were times where as I talked, my coach and those around me were like, "Wow, you know, do you realize how you're saying this?" And they started caring for my heart even more than I cared for it.
Mhm.
And so they helped me work through some things and they walked with me through some of those seasons and that was a powerful thing. It was a life-changing, a life-saving thing, ministry-saving thing, quite honestly.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
so how do you keep yourself after all these years of doing ministry and with the intense pace that you're running? How do you keep yourself in a healthy place? How do you care for your heart? What are some of the practices that you've implemented?
Sure. That's a really good question without giving a lot away in the chapter because the chapter spells out a lot of what I do.
Yeah.
What is not in the chapter is I had to own it.
Mm,
And I think sometimes, and this has been me in the past as well, is I expected somebody else to carry that weight and to remind me to care for my heart. And why isn't my boss seeing this? And why aren't they doing this? I needed to start owning that. So, first and foremost, I um, I care for my heart by owning that it's my responsibility to
oh, that's so
care for my heart. And I always, always go vertical first. My first, right? My
yeah,
first ministry is my relationship with Him, with
yeah,
Jesus. And that has to be my first priority.
yeah,
Before my feet hit the ground in the morning, that has to be my first priority, is my relationship with Him. And that has been a key learning to me. And when it's not, like my heart care suffers. And so I think just making sure I'm going vertical in my relationship with him and then my relationship with my family second.
yeah,
And then it's my role at the church. There has been seasons where that has not always been the case. And sometimes when we can get those inverted, it can also play with our heart
yeah,
and yeah, caring for our heart can suffer. So that's a couple of things that I really do. There's a other things that our cohort is a big way for me to care for my heart. Just having people
yes,
that I can go to, those people that I can text and just send that prayer request. Those people
yep,
that I know that will be praying for me at the drop of a hat.
yep,
That is another big way of how I care for my heart. I truly believe in the body and praying for one another.
yep,
I think it's one of the um, biggest blessings that you can do for someone. I love being able to pray and lift up people in prayer. And
yep,
so those are a couple ways that I really care for my heart. Do I get it perfect every week? No.
yep,
And when I don't, I can feel it,
yeah, right, right. You can.
right?
And
It's not passive, it's active. It
Oh, that's good.
needs to be an active thing that
Yes.
each one of us does.
Yes. And I can tell you, folks, I don't think she'll mind me telling you. She practices this. She practices what
Mm.
she preaches. I know because in our cohort group, just this week, she posted, and it's been a while since anybody did it, but she did it. She said, "How can I pray for you guys? It's been a while. Drop
Mm.
some prayer requests in there." And
Yeah,
it got me praying for the rest of the cohort. And I felt the prayers from others. And so thank you for doing that, by the way, because it does mean a lot.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, all right, final question, and we got to wrap up. I hate doing that, but we do. But why do you think everyone does better with a coach?
Ooh, well, I think everybody does better with a coach because we're not made to go at it alone, right? It's that
Yep.
whole loneliness. We're not made to do this alone. I also think leaders are learners. And so it's hard to learn by yourself.
Yeah.
And so everyone does better with a coach because you have somebody that you can learn from. Also, that might be you are teaching them something. I think it's a two-way. It's just not one way. I think
Yes.
everyone does better with a coach because it's a two-way
Yes.
street. But if I were to, number one reason why everyone does better with a coach is because you're not meant to do ministry alone.
Yep.
Whether you're at a church of one in a rural area or if you are at a church of 8,000 with many people, everyone does better with a coach.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, it's just so helpful in so many ways. I think we just sometimes even forget the basics, right? Like you and
Yep.
I can be talking, Tom, and we've been in ministry for a long time, so we know a lot of these things. And you'll just say something, and I'm like, oh, you say it, and it's like I'm hearing it for the first time,
Right.
and it's new. That's why everyone does better with a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. I will
Yeah.
tell you, since I launched kmccoach.net and started doing leadership coaching, I have learned so much. In fact, I joked with Jim, I would, I wished I had taken notes better in some of my early
Mm,
days of coaching and to compared to what I do now, because I think I could write a book just based on the nuggets that I've gotten from those who I've coached. I get so much out of the experience talking to leaders, and I love working with the young leaders, the new leaders, because they're showing me things, they're doing things that I wouldn't have thought about. And so,
mhm.
and I'm able to take that and pass it to somebody else too, which is fun to be the conduit that says, "Hey, I just learned this from a leader. I want to share this because this might work with you." And it's been fun to even bring leaders together. In fact, I given your telling you this now on air. This is funny. I'd given your name out to somebody, and I really do need to make an introduction because there's a multi-site leader that I think you two need to talk because I think she could benefit from you and all, and she's fantastic too. So we'll have to talk about that another time. But yeah, I
Another
agree
day.
with you. I think that's pretty powerful. So, all right, Vicky. Well, if people want to follow or learn more about you or what you do, I know you're doing a little coaching here and there amongst all the other things you're doing. But if people are interested in catching up or following you, how would they do that?
Absolutely. So, the first way that you could get a hold of me, probably the easiest way, is on social media. So, on Facebook, search Vicki Abbott is probably the easiest way. And then follow me, send me a DM. Would love to get to know you. Then I am on Instagram. And if you're interested in any type of coaching or talking multi-site, those who are starting out in ministry, or if you're a seasoned leader who feels like you're going at it alone, you can always email me at abbottbl@gmail.com. And yeah, would love to catch up.
Awesome. Well, Vicki,
Yeah.
thanks so much for taking time out the extra hour to catch up,
I
but
know
then to
it's
record.
been so good. So
Yes, it
good.
is.
I definitely you said something about those nuggets and I wrote down three nuggets from our pre-recording of things that I'm going to take away. So
Cool.
always a blessing to catch up
Yep.
with you.
Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you so much. And when we get up to Michigan again, we're going to have to get together and go do some coffee. So,
Absolutely.
as I come up on that direction every once in a while. So,
Anyone who is in the Grand Rapids area, if they want to catch up for coffee, I am willing to have coffee.
well, there you go. That you ought to do that. And I know we've got some listeners up that area. So,
There
all
you
right.
go.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Kids Ministry Collective podcast. Again, if there's anything we can do for you, please reach out if you want to know more about coaching with Vicki from me, or if again, I've always said this, if I'm not a good fit, I will recommend people like Vicki and others that I know that are qualified, who've been trained, and will serve you well. We just want you to stop doing ministry alone. We want you to care for your heart. And so if we can help you in any way, shape, or form, just let us know. You can even email me at tom@tombump.com. I'm happy to serve you. So that's it. That's going to wrap up this episode, and you can stay tuned for another episode real soon.